Yeah, I think stuff to do with family overwhelms me quite a bit.
I think the Queen's duty and her service, her tolerance, her...
5 minutes ago, a quiet but ruthless shift in power just caught Queen Camilla entirely off guard. Prince William has executed a last-minute tactical strike directly targeting Camilla's inner circle and the palace gates locked behind them before anyone realized what was happening. This wasn't a warning, it was a permanent surgical eviction from the corridors of royal influence. As Camilla's closest allies look at what they have officially lost, the palace is realizing William isn't waiting for the crown to make his rules. What exactly did the prince just strip away? Let's look at the sudden decree. The move nobody saw coming. There are two kinds of power moves inside the British royal family. The first kind announces itself. It arrives with press releases and carefully managed media briefings, and the full apparatus of palace communications deployed to shape the narrative before it reaches the public. The second kind does not announce itself at all. It arrives quietly, precisely, and with such deliberate timing that by the time the people it affects fully understand what has happened, the move is already complete and irreversible. What Prince William did in the third week of February 2026 was emphatically the second kind. He did not call a press conference. He did not brief royal correspondents in advance. He did not allow any of the usual signals to leak through the channels that normally carry advance warning of significant palace decisions. He simply acted, and what he did sent a message through Camilla's inner circle with the force and clarity of something that had been building for a very long time and had finally arrived at its destination. The move involved the formal removal of 3 individuals from their advisory roles within the royal household. 3 people who had, over a period of several years, built positions of considerable influence inside the palace structure through their proximity to Camilla. Their roles were not ceremonial. They were not the kind of advisory positions that exist on paper and mean very little in practice. These were individuals with real access, real influence, and real ability to shape decisions that affected the institution at a significant level. Their removal was processed through the household's internal administrative channels on a Tuesday morning. No announcement was made, no statement was issued. The changes simply appeared in the relevant internal records, and the individuals concerned were notified directly and privately that their roles had been terminated with immediate effect. By Tuesday afternoon, the information had begun moving through the palace in the way that significant information always moves through the palace. Quietly, rapidly, and with a gathering weight that told everyone who heard it that something important had just happened. Sources described the atmosphere among Camilla's closest associates as one of genuine shock, not because the individuals concerned had been unaware that William had reservations about their influence, not because the possibility of some kind of institutional correction had never been contemplated, but because of the speed, because of the completeness, and because of the timing, which came with no warning, no preceding escalation, and no opportunity for the kind of quiet negotiation that might have softened the impact. William had not telegraphed this move. He had not sent signals through intermediaries, or allowed his displeasure to be known through the usual back channels. He had simply waited until he was ready and then acted with a precision that left no room for appeal or reversal. For those 3 individuals, the practical consequences were immediate and significant. Access to certain palace facilities was withdrawn within 24 hours. Invitations to upcoming official events were quietly rescinded, and the informal network of communication that had connected them to the center of royal decision-making was severed in a way that everyone inside the institution understood was not temporary. But the practical consequences for those 3 people, significant as they were, are almost secondary to the broader message that William's move sent to everyone else connected to Camilla's world. Because this was not simply an administrative decision about 3 advisory roles, it was a statement. A clear, unambiguous, deliberately timed statement about where the boundaries of acceptable influence now sat inside the royal household, and who had the authority to enforce those boundaries. That authority, as everyone inside the palace now understands with complete clarity, belongs to William, not in the future. Not in some theoretical post-succession scenario where he has finally become king and can reshape the institution according to his vision, now, today. In the present tense, and with immediate consequences, for anyone who has not yet grasped how fundamentally the power dynamics inside that building have shifted. The individuals removed were not random selections. They were not chosen because of personal animosity or arbitrary preference. They were chosen, sources confirm, because each of them represented a specific category of concern that William had been documenting and assessing for months. One had been involved in facilitating access to sensitive palace information for individuals outside the household who had no legitimate need for that information. One had been using their advisory position to advance commercial interests that intersected uncomfortably with royal heritage assets. And one had been operating as an informal channel of communication between Camilla's world and individuals whose connection to ongoing palace scandals made their access to the inner household deeply inappropriate. Each of those concerns, taken individually, might have been managed through quieter means: a private conversation, an informal warning, a gentle but firm redirection. William had considered those options. He had, sources confirm, already exhausted some of them in the months preceding February 2026. The quieter interventions had not produced the required change. The boundaries that had been drawn informally had continued to be tested. And William had reached the conclusion that the only language this particular situation would respond to was the language of formal, documented, irreversible action. So he acted, swiftly, completely, and without the kind of advance warning that would have allowed the people concerned to prepare a response, mobilize their allies, or appeal to Camilla in time to intercept the decision before it landed. The question now hanging over the palace is not whether William had the authority to do what he did. That question has already been answered. The question is what it reveals about the people he removed, the network they were part of, and the extent to which Camilla's inner circle had been operating in ways that William considered incompatible with the institution he is determined to build. Because the answer to that question is more troubling than most people outside the palace currently realize, and it begins with understanding exactly who these people were and how they got so close to the center of royal power in the first place. Who is Camilla's inner circle and why it matters? Every senior royal has an inner circle. That is not unusual. It is not suspicious. It is simply the reality of navigating a life lived entirely in public, where trust is the scarcest and most valuable commodity available. You build a small, carefully selected group of people around you. People who know the full picture. People who can be trusted with information that cannot leave the room. People whose loyalty has been tested over time and found to be genuine. Camilla's inner circle did not begin as a problem. It began, like most things in her royal life, as a necessary adaptation to circumstances that were genuinely difficult. When she married Charles in April 2005, she entered an institution that had spent the better part of a decade treating her as the villain of one of the most public marital breakdowns in modern history. The public's grief over Diana had never fully separated itself from its anger toward Camilla. And inside the palace itself, there were courtiers and staff members whose loyalty to Diana's memory made their relationship with Camilla complicated from the very beginning. She needed people she could trust, people who were unambiguously on her side, people who would not brief against her or allow the institutional machinery to be used to undermine her position. And over the years that followed her marriage, she assembled exactly that. A small, tight, fiercely loyal network of individuals who understood that their own position inside the palace was directly connected to hers. The three individuals William removed in February 2026 were among the most senior and most influential members of that network. Their names have not been made public. The palace has been careful to ensure that the administrative nature of the changes provides sufficient cover to avoid the kind of named individual reporting that would turn this into a tabloid story rather than an institutional one. But sources close to the household have provided enough detail about their roles and their histories to understand exactly why William identified them as the problem he needed to address. The first was a senior communications advisor who had been attached to Camilla's office for nearly 12 years. She had arrived in the household through a personal recommendation from one of Camilla's closest friends outside the palace, a connection that bypassed the formal recruitment process that governs most senior household appointments. Over the years, she had built a role that extended well beyond its original brief. She had become involved in decisions about palace messaging that touched on areas far outside Camilla's specific remit. She had developed relationships with senior media figures that gave her, and by extension Camilla's office, an informal influence over royal coverage that the wider household had not sanctioned and was not always aware of. The second was a policy advisor whose formal role connected to several of the charitable initiatives Camilla championed. His position gave him access to a wide range of palace information and a legitimate reason to be present in meetings where sensitive institutional matters were discussed. Sources describe him as highly intelligent, deeply political, and entirely focused on advancing Camilla's influence within the household at the expense of the kind of institutional transparency that William has made his defining priority. He had been involved, sources confirm, in at least 2 situations where information from private palace meetings had found its way to outside parties in ways that could not be explained by accident or oversight. The third was perhaps the most significant of the 3, a personal aide who had been with Camilla since before her marriage to Charles. Someone whose loyalty to Camilla was absolute and whose access to her daily life was total. This individual had, over the years, become an informal gatekeeper, a person through whom requests for Camilla's attention were filtered, through whom information about her schedule and her private positions on various matters was managed, and through whom, sources allege, a series of communications had been channeled that connected Camilla's world to individuals whose presence on the periphery of palace life William considered a direct institutional liability. The common thread running through all 3 is not simply loyalty to Camilla. Loyalty alone would not have triggered William's response. The common thread is the way that loyalty had been operationalized. Each of these individuals had used their proximity to Camilla, not merely to serve and protect her, but to accumulate a form of institutional influence that existed outside the formal structures of the household, and was therefore outside the formal accountability mechanisms that govern how the palace is supposed to operate. They had built, in effect, a parallel structure, a small, informal, but genuinely powerful network that could shape decisions, manage information, and advance specific interests from within the palace, without being fully visible to or accountable to the people who were nominally in charge of the institution. William had been aware of this structure for longer than any of them realized. He had been mapping it quietly for months, understanding who the key nodes were, how information flowed through it, and where its influence intersected most dangerously with the formal machinery of the household. He had been patient, he had been methodical, and he had waited until he had a complete enough picture to act decisively rather than partially. The removal of all 3 individuals simultaneously rather than sequentially was itself a message. It signaled that William was not making incremental adjustments or sending warning shots. He was dismantling the structure in a single coordinated move that left no part of it intact and no opportunity for the remaining members to regroup around whoever survived. That kind of precision does not happen by accident. It happens when someone has been planning carefully for a long time, and it raises a question that everyone inside the palace is now sitting with uncomfortably. How long had William known, and what exactly had he uncovered while he was watching? That answer reveals a pattern far more troubling than 3 removed advisors. The pattern William could no longer ignore. There is a difference between a single incident and a pattern. A single incident can be explained, it can be contextualized, it can be attributed to poor judgment or unfortunate circumstance, or the kind of human error that every institution, however disciplined, occasionally produces. A pattern is something else entirely. A pattern is a statement of intent, and what William had been quietly documenting inside the palace over the preceding 18 months was unmistakably a pattern. It had not begun with anything dramatic. The first incident that caught William's attention was small enough that most people in his position would have filed it away as a minor irritation and moved on. It involved a briefing document, a sensitive internal assessment of the palace's communications strategy in relation to the ongoing Andrew situation that had been prepared for a closed meeting of senior household advisors in the summer of 2024. The document was classified at the highest level of internal sensitivity. It was distributed to a very small number of people. And within 72 hours of that meeting, elements of its content had appeared in a media report that demonstrated unmistakable familiarity with the document's specific language and conclusions. William ordered a quiet internal review. The review could not definitively identify the source of the leak, but it narrowed the field of possibilities considerably. And one of the 3 individuals he removed in February 2026 was inside that narrowed field. William noted it. He said nothing publicly. He made no accusation. He simply noted it and continued watching. The second incident came in October 2024 and was considerably more significant. It involved a meeting between one of Camilla's senior advisors and a commercial property consultant who had been connected in previous months to at least 2 proposals for the commercial development of royal heritage assets. The meeting took place outside the palace at a private members' club in central London. It was not logged through any official household channel. It was not disclosed to William's office or to the relevant legal teams responsible for overseeing royal property interests. A member of William's staff became aware of the meeting through a coincidence that the advisor concerned could not have anticipated. The details were passed to William within 24 hours. He reviewed them. He cross-referenced them against other information he had been accumulating, and he began to see the outline of something that went considerably beyond informal, socializing between a palace aide and a property professional. The commercial consultant who attended that meeting had connections to the same network of Gulf-based investors that had been linked to Tom Parker Bowles's abandoned Elmridge Park venture. The meeting in October 2024 had taken place 3 months before Anne filed her formal complaint, which meant that while the Elmridge situation was still developing, while Tom's plans were still being constructed and his investor conversations were still ongoing, someone inside Camilla's advisory network had been in direct contact with people connected to that same commercial world. Whether that contact was coordinated, whether it was coincidental, or whether it represented something more deliberate is a question that William's internal review has been working to answer. But the existence of the connection, in the context of everything else William was seeing, was impossible to dismiss. The third incident arrived in January 2025 and was the one that shifted William's assessment from concern to something closer to certainty. It involved communications, specifically a series of messages that had been exchanged between the personal aide in Camilla's inner circle and an individual whose name had appeared in connection with the Epstein network documents released by the United States Department of Justice in late 2024. The messages did not contain anything overtly criminal. They did not discuss anything that could be characterized as directly improper on their face. But their existence and the fact that they had been exchanged through channels that bypassed the palace's official communications monitoring systems represented exactly the kind of institutional boundary violation that William had made clear he considered unacceptable. He had made that clarity known in the aftermath of Andrew's arrest. He had communicated through the appropriate channels that any connection between palace staff and individuals linked to the Epstein matter, however indirect, however seemingly innocent, was to be disclosed immediately and managed through the household's formal protocols. The messages had not been disclosed. They had been discovered through a separate internal review process, and the failure to disclose them was, in William's assessment, as serious as the messages themselves. By the time 2025 moved into 2026, William had 3 documented incidents, each involving a different member of Camilla's inner circle, each representing a different category of institutional concern, and each pointing toward the same conclusion. This was not a series of isolated lapses. This was a network that had normalized operating outside the boundaries of institutional accountability. A network that had come to believe, through years of quiet tolerance, that its proximity to Camilla placed it beyond the reach of the standards that governed everyone else inside the household. The final trigger came in the first week of February 2026. A routine audit of palace access records identified an anomaly. One of the 3 advisors had accessed a restricted section of the household's internal document management system on 3 separate occasions in January 2026. The documents accessed related to William's legal strategy concerning the protected royal estates. The advisor had no legitimate professional reason to access those documents. No request for access had been submitted. No authorization had been granted. William reviewed the audit finding on a Thursday evening. He consulted his legal advisor on Friday morning, was the language of formal, documented, irreversible action. And on the following Tuesday, all 3 members of Camilla's inner circle were removed from their roles simultaneously. He had not acted impulsively. He had not acted emotionally. He had waited until the pattern was complete, the documentation was airtight, and the case was unassailable. And then he moved with the speed and finality that has become the defining characteristic of his approach to protecting the institution he is preparing to lead. But when the news reached Camilla, the response was anything but quiet, and Charles, caught directly in the middle, faced a choice that no husband and no king should ever have to make. Camilla's response, and Charles caught in the middle. When Camilla learned what William had done, Her first response was not sadness. It was not resignation. It was not the quiet acceptance of someone who had seen this coming and had already made her peace with it. Her first response, according to sources close to the household who were briefed on the hours that followed, was fury. Cold, controlled, and completely focused fury, directed not just at William, but at the institution she had spent 20 years trying to make her home. She had known, in a general sense, that William was unhappy with certain members of her staff. She had received signals through the usual informal channels that his patience with some of the people around her was wearing thin. But she had not known the specifics. She had not known about the internal reviews. She had not known about the access log anomaly that had triggered the final decision. She had not known that William had been building a documented case over 18 months that was comprehensive enough to make the removals completely unassailable from a procedural standpoint. That last detail was perhaps the most infuriating element for her. Not that William had acted, but that he had acted in a way that left her no procedural ground to challenge it. Every removal had been processed correctly. Every decision had been documented appropriately. Every relevant household protocol had been followed to the letter. There was no administrative error to seize on, no procedural irregularity to contest. William had ensured that the only argument available to Camilla was a personal one. And personal arguments, as she understood very well, carry very little institutional weight inside a palace that is in the process of reorganizing itself around a new set of priorities. She went to Charles. That much is confirmed by multiple sources. She went to him within hours of learning about the removals, and she made her position clear. She believed William had overstepped. She believed the decision to remove 3 senior members of her advisory team without any prior consultation with her or with Charles was an act of institutional aggression that went beyond the authority William currently held. She was not asking Charles to reverse the decision. She was asking him to tell his son that there were limits, that the transfer of authority that had been quietly underway for months had boundaries, that she was still the Queen Consort of Great Britain, and that her household deserved a basic level of respect and consultation before decisions of this magnitude were taken. Charles listened. Those who know him well describe the particular quality of silence he produces when he is hearing something he finds deeply uncomfortable. Not the silence of someone with nothing to say, but the silence of someone who has too much to say and is carefully selecting which part of it to release. He sat with Camilla's words for a long moment, and then he said something that she had not been expecting. He said she was not wrong, that consultation would have been appropriate. He said he wished the process had been handled differently. And then he said that he had reviewed the documentation William had compiled, and that the substance of the concerns it contained was serious enough that he could not ask William to reverse the decisions he had made. Camilla left that conversation, sources say, in a state of disbelief, not because Charles had refused to support her entirely, but because of the specific way he had framed his refusal. He had not said William was right. He had not endorsed the manner in which it had been done. But by acknowledging the substance of William's documented concerns, he had effectively told Camilla that the people she had trusted most closely inside the palace had given William legitimate grounds to act. And that was a different kind of blow entirely. For Charles, the position he occupied in those days was one of the most genuinely painful of his reign. He is a man who has spent his entire life navigating the competing demands of family loyalty and institutional responsibility. He spent decades watching those two things pull against each other. He knows better than almost anyone what it costs when the institution wins. And yet here he was again, facing a version of the same impossible calculation. His wife on one side, his son and the future of the monarchy on the other. He handled it the way he has increasingly handled the most difficult internal conflicts of his reign. He absorbed the blow privately. He maintained a public face of normalcy. He appeared at 2 scheduled engagements in the days following the removals, without any visible sign of the domestic turbulence that sources confirm was very real behind palace walls. And he did not issue any public statement either supporting or criticizing what William had done. That silence from Charles was, as always, its own kind of statement. It told William that he would not face institutional resistance from his father over what he had done. It told Camilla that she would not receive the public backing she had hoped for. And it told the 3 removed advisors that whatever private sympathy Charles might have felt for their situation, it would not translate into any action on their behalf. William, for his part, did not seek Charles out in the aftermath. He did not offer reassurances or explanations. He had made his move, documented his reasoning, followed every required process, and arrived at a conclusion he believed was fully justified. He did not consider that to require further justification to anyone. Sources describe the atmosphere between William and Camilla in the weeks following the removals as the coldest it has been since the early years after Charles and Camilla's marriage. Civil in public, essentially absent in private. Two people who understand that they are on a trajectory toward a future where one of them holds all the institutional power and the other holds none. And both of them, in their different ways, preparing for that reality. But what does William's move actually signal about the monarchy he is building? And what does it mean for everyone still inside Camilla's world? The new boundaries and what they signal. Step back from the specific details of what happened in February 2026 and look at the broader picture, because what William did to Camilla's inner circle was not simply a personnel decision. It was not a housekeeping exercise or a routine restructuring of advisory roles. It was a declaration, a precise, carefully timed, fully documented declaration about the kind of institution the British monarchy is going to be under his leadership. And the implications of that declaration extend far beyond the three individuals who lost their roles on a Tuesday morning. To understand what William is actually building, you have to understand what he is building against. He grew up watching an institution that had developed, over decades, a particular and deeply problematic relationship with informal power. Power that did not sit in official titles or formal roles, but in proximity, in access, in the ability to be in the right room at the right moment and to use the information gathered there for purposes that served personal or factional interests rather than the institution itself. He watched that informal power structure cause real damage. He saw how it allowed scandals to develop in the shadows long before they became visible to the people who should have been managing them. He saw how it created networks of loyalty inside the palace that competed with and sometimes overrode the formal chains of accountability that were supposed to govern how decisions were made. And he concluded, with the clarity of someone who had seen the consequences up close, that this was not a feature of royal life that could be managed or tolerated. It was a structural weakness that had to be eliminated. The removal of Camilla's three advisors was the most visible act in a much longer and much quieter campaign to do exactly that. Sources familiar with William's thinking describe a prince who has been systematically identifying and addressing every pocket of informal power inside the household that operates outside the structures of formal accountability. Every relationship that bypasses official channels. Every role that has expanded beyond its original brief through personal connection rather than institutional need. Every individual whose influence inside the palace derives from proximity to a senior royal rather than from a clearly defined and formally sanctioned professional function. He has been doing this work carefully and without announcement for the better part of 2 years. The removal of Annabel Elliot from the Duchy of Cornwall payroll was part of it. The full audit of royal property access logs that followed the Elmridge Park scandal was part of it. And the simultaneous removal of 3 members of Camilla's inner circle in February 2026 was the most significant and most visible part of it yet. What emerges from all of these actions, taken together, is a coherent and deliberate institutional vision. William is building a monarchy where influence is earned through formal role and demonstrated merit rather than accumulated through personal connection and informal access. Where the boundaries between the professional world of the palace and the personal worlds of the people who inhabit it are clearly drawn and consistently enforced. Where accountability is not something that applies to some people some of the time, but something that applies to everyone all of the time without exception for title, relationship, or history. That vision has consequences for a lot of people. Not just the 3 advisors who lost their roles in February. Not just Camilla and the network she had built around her over 20 years. But for everyone inside the extended royal world who has become accustomed to a certain kind of informal access and informal influence that William's new order simply does not have room for. For Camilla specifically, the consequences are significant and long-term. She has not been stripped of her title. She has not been publicly criticized or formally sanctioned. She remains queen consort with all the formal status that entails. But the network that had given her informal influence inside the household beyond her official role has been dismantled. The people through whom she had been able to shape decisions, manage information, and extend her reach into areas of palace life that were not formally her domain are gone. And the message that their removal sends to anyone considering filling those roles in the future is unmistakably clear. Camilla is not without allies inside the palace. She still has Charles. She still has the formal protections of her position. And she still has the public profile she has carefully built over 2 decades of royal service, a profile that has, against considerable odds, developed genuine warmth and public respect in ways that few people would have predicted in the years following Diana's death. Those things are real, and they are not nothing. But inside the household, the balance of informal power has shifted in a way that cannot be reversed, while William is the dominant force in the institution, and William shows every sign of remaining exactly that for the foreseeable future. For the broader royal family, William's move sends a message that resonates well beyond Camilla's specific situation. It tells every senior royal and every member of their extended personal networks that the era of informal influence operating unchecked inside the palace is ending. That the new order William is establishing does not make exceptions for personal loyalty or long-standing relationship. That the standards he is applying are being applied consistently and will continue to be applied consistently regardless of whose circle is affected. Princess Anne, who has been William's most visible ally in the institutional reform project that has been quietly unfolding across the past 18 months, reportedly described William's handling of the situation with characteristic brevity. She said, "He did what needed to be done." For Anne, that is as close to an unqualified endorsement as she ever offers anyone. Catherine, whose own role inside the palace has been expanding steadily as her health has continued to improve following her cancer treatment, has been closely involved in the vision that underpins everything William is doing. Sources describe her not as a background figure supporting her husband's decisions, but as an active co-architect of the institutional framework he is building. The accountability structures, the formal merit-based approach to household appointments, the zero-tolerance position on informal power operating outside official channels. These are shared convictions, developed through years of shared observation and shared commitment to an institution they intend to lead very differently from the way it has been led before. What William did to Camilla's inner circle in February 2026 will not be the last move of this kind. It will not be the last time that someone who has grown comfortable with informal access inside the palace discovers that the new order has a different set of rules. There will be more audits, more formal reviews, more quiet removals processed through administrative channels without press releases or public drama. Because William is not finished. He is methodical, he is patient, and he is building something that he intends to last. And the people who have not yet understood that the palace they navigated under Charles is not the palace they will be navigating under William are running out of time to adjust. The boundaries have been drawn, they have been enforced, and as everyone connected to Camilla's inner circle now understands with complete and irreversible clarity, Prince William means every single one of them. William did not raise his voice. He did not threaten or warn or negotiate. He simply removed the problem and moved forward. That is the monarchy he is building. Quiet, accountable, and completely intolerant of the informal power games that damaged this institution for decades. The new order has arrived,